Hi and welcome to this week's video. This time I want to show you how you can create your own REST API with JavaScript and Express. So this tutorial will be split into multiple videos. Each video will then handle one request. For example, this video will be about the GET request. So subscribe to the channel so you don't miss out the other ones. So let's don't talk too much and jump in. But first, let me explain what a REST API is, what a HTTP protocol is, and what the client-server approach is. If you already know that, then jump to the next chapter where I actually start coding the API. So let's start with the client-server architecture, which is used by the most applications these days. On the one hand, you have a client, or also known as the front end, which is your application. Under the hood, it needs to talk with the server, or known as the back end, to get or update data within it. So that the client and the server can communicate, they are using a protocol, the HTTP protocol. So on the server side, what we are doing is to expose an API, where the client then can communicate through that API with the server. So what does REST stand for? REST stands for Representational State Transfer. And this can be used to create, read, update, or delete data on the server, also known as the CRUD Operations. So let's start coding our REST API with Node.js and Express. Alright, so I just created a new project in the folder with the name API tutorial. And in here we are going to our terminal and we do the npm init with a parameter yes to create a new project with the default settings. So that's done. So we have our package.json already. And this folder, we do again an npm e for install, and we simply install Express.js. So Express is a lightweight JavaScript library, which is used a lot. So last week, 30 million people downloaded the package, and we can do some HTTP routing with for the Node.js package to make it even more simple. To check if you have Node installed, you can type node-v for version and hit enter. And if you get a result like this, you have Node installed. Otherwise, I recommend you to install Node first. So in the next step, we are adding a simple index.js file. In here, we are now importing our Express library. For that, we do a require, and we are requiring Express. We want to save that into an Express constant. The next thing is to make Express actually available. So we need to call the Express function. And for that, we're doing the same thing. A good convention is to use the keyword app here and then just call the Express function. So now we actually can handle our first request. So we just simple type app.get. We then have to put in the path for the actual request. So in this case, we take the root, and in here, we are calling a function with two parameters. It's the request and the respond. And in here, we just simply respond. We're calling the send function. And we call here just the typical hello world, so that we know that the server is currently running. So we are then have to set up our server. And with that, we just need to type app dot, and we need to listen to somewhere. And we are just selecting our port, which is 3000 in this case. If the port 3000 is not available on your system, because it's reserved from another service, then just choose another port, which is free. Behind our 3000, we input also a second parameter, which is a function where we will output a console log that we are listening on so that we are actually know that our service is running. So we get listen on port 3000 here. So we go to our browser and we are calling localhost 3000. And we get our hello world example. So now things are getting interesting. We are creating our first actual API call. And I took the example of simply providing food through the API. So in here, we again have the request and the respond. And we are calling this time, we are sending this time our food. Food in this case, I would just put in here an array, let's say at the beginning, and this is an apple, and returning a banana and some wheat. 3 different types of food. Now, if we go back to our browser and reload, and we would go to food, nothing will happen. The reason for that is you would need to start all the time your service again, your Node server. So after stopping the server and starting it up again, we are actually can call the food API, and we are getting our array with food. Since this is pretty tedious to do all the time, we can install another package, which is called nodemon. So we do the npm e, and we want to do it globally. And we just simply type nodemon. It's downloading the package, and what nodemon does is it watches your server. So we just simply type nodemon index.js. And now, as you can see, the server started up. Every time we are saving the index.js now, nodemon will stop and restart the server automatically. So let's just add, for example, here another food type, and we go with something. And you could see that it's restarting due to changes. And if we call or reload our browser, we see that something was added to the array. Now we can also add another API. And this time it gets more dynamic. So we are still listening to food, but then let's take, we are listening to the parameter of type. And again, we are inserting the request and respond function. The colon type is now a parameter. So I can call the API slash, and then, for example, I want to get the fruits. Currently, of course, nothing will be in there, but here I should get the food of the type fruit, which would be in this case the apple. So let's build up this whole thing. So it would make sense to not send an array here, but we want to have this maybe in a constant. And this constant would be food. We have still an array, but this time we have an array of objects. Or our object would contain a type of food. So for example, a fruit, and the name of that fruit would be an apple. Then we just copy that line. All right, and instead of sending now here the fixed array, we just return the food constant. So if we call the food again, we now get back an array with our objects of type fruit. Now, what we are going to do is for this API, we now can select the type. So in here, we define a constant, which is the food type. And here we will now want to find the type which was entered by the user or called by the browser through the URL. So what we are doing is we make use of a simple function which is available in JavaScript, and that's the find function. And we want to find a food type, and we want to compare it with the actual request parameter dot type. So this is now our food type, so the type of the current food, and this one is the type which was given or sent through the request. So this would now return either true or false. So if we have a food type, so if we can't find the food type because it's empty, we want to respond correctly with the correct HTTP header. And this would be in this case a 404 header because we can't find it. And I would also send a message here so that the user knows what the problem is. So the food with the given type could not be found. If this is not the case, then we can just send our food type. So the API reloaded, and now we can go in here and say I want, for example, the fruit. So now I get the object type fruit name apple. Of course, you could also extend that even furthermore. So you could here say type, and then you could also be, I want to have a specific name in the URL. You could type fruit, and not only fruit, but also apple. This of course would now return nothing because we don't do anything there, but theoretically you could also grab the request type, the request parameter of name, and then the type. All right. Then one problem we still have is that the app currently only listens to the port 3000, and in your or on your server, this port normally changes. So this has to be variable, and for that we create a simple constant called port, and here we want to access the environment variable, which is port. So we simply can access this by process dot environment dot, and here you already get the suggestion port. So we are getting actually the current port of the environment, and if this is not given, then we use the port 3000. So this would make sure if your server has the environment variable port set, that the app would now use this port. Otherwise, if you're, for example, in your dev instance, you would use the port 3000. So down here, we just have to replace the 3000 with port. And in our console log, instead of using single quotes, I'm using the backticks. And then in here, can use the output of the variable with $, curly brackets, port, curly bracket, close. So if I reload that, listen on port 3000, still the same, but it actually should have changed. So as you can see, setting up REST APIs with Node.js and Express is not that hard to do. I hope you liked this tutorial. In the next one, I will show you how you can set up the post request, so don't miss that. Don't forget to like the video and subscribe to my channel so that you don't miss the video when it's coming online. If you want to see more videos like that, then let me know in the comments. Otherwise, see you in the other tutorial.